the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you. For you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So we all know that we are supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves, right? That is a given of this text, even from the lawyer's point of view, because he had studied the Hebrew law. His question was based upon an understanding of Leviticus 19:18, which is the original love your neighbor as yourself passage. While he and Jesus began the discussion based upon the same shared knowledge, per Jewish custom, Jesus, the rabbi, took it a step further to reveal a new way for the lawyer to see the answer to this question, who is my neighbor? What led to the lawyer's question may have been a desire to limit the number of people that he was responsible for. Although I could just be projecting that onto him, because we live in a culture where it seems we are often trying to limit the number of people that we care for. But the language of Leviticus 19 in the original scriptures does not necessarily imply that our neighbor is all people, because they use the word for neighbor, pleoson, which can also be translated as near. As such, it could be assumed that the law only applies to your nearby neighbor, which could be extrapolated to your family, to your community, or the nation in which you reside. Although this is true, it should also be noted that in Leviticus 19:34, several passages down, the neighbor is specifically expanded to include the foreigner. It says, "The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the citizen among you. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. That's right. I am the Lord your God." Nevertheless, the lawyers posing the question allowed Jesus to expand and clarify that the neighbor includes all people. In an age of deciding our actions based on one, maybe two verses in the Bible, this passage gives power to the practice of reading deeper and beyond just the select verses that prove what we already believe to be true. Now, when Jesus told parables, it was his way of expanding our understanding of the law. In this way, the Samaritan would have been a huge surprise to the listeners, because in the Jewish culture of the day, the priest, the Levite, and the Samaritan were not a logical sequence. The first two would have been assumed to be the people to show compassion because of their roles in Jewish society. But because of the enmity between Jewish society and Samaritans, it would have been a shock to the hearer to learn that a Samaritan cared for a fellow Jew. Now I'm going to bring that to some stories that relate to today. Riding the Q train in Brooklyn one Friday night, Muslim Hassan Askari noticed 10 guys hassling a young couple for replying Happy Hanukkah when greeted with Merry Christmas. Fearing for the woman's safety, he pushed one guy away, and the mob pounced on the hero. This gave the two victims time to pull the subway's emergency brake and summon help. Askari received 2 black eyes and a sore nose for his efforts. But he never went to a doctor because he worked 2 jobs and couldn't afford medical care. The other victim, Walter Adler, he received a broken nose and required 4 stitches for a split lip. And he said that he was shocked that a Muslim kid helped some Jewish kids. And that is what he loved about New York. Julian Durrett was strolling in New York's South Street Seaport with his girlfriend when he saw something fall into the water. At first he thought it was a dog, but then he realized it was actually a baby. In an instant, he stripped down and dove into the filthy, freezing East River. Reaching her first, Durrett handed the unresponsive child to her father, who was then lifted to safety. Once out of the water, young Bridget Anderson opened her eyes. Anderson's father praised Durrett as the first man in the water. Back on the pier, onlookers shed their dry clothes and gave them to the freezing Durrett. He said he was glad to help and went on his way. Only later did he realize the rescue had captured the hearts of New Yorkers, who were desperate to find this mystery Frenchman. Once discovered, the humble engineer relented to an interview, and he said, "I've never done anything like this before." Now, Guatemalan immigrant Hugo Alfredo Talley. He came to the aid of a woman being threatened by a man wielding a knife. Talley struggled with the attacker, but was eventually stabbed and left to die on a Jamaica Queens street. The woman and the attacker fled in different directions, while he lay bleeding. Video surveillance filmed portions of the attack and its aftermath. Cameras showed that one man, he filmed Talley with his cell phone, but called no one. 18 other people saw what happened and walked past him. All refused to render aid or contact authorities. The closest anyone came to helping the man was one man who shook the body vigorously, but then walked on when he saw the pool of blood. Firefighters arrived 15 minutes later, but by then, it was too late. Our current leadership in this country stereotypes the Guatemalan as the rapist and murderer, yet he was the hero to this woman who even she did not help him. The people who watching simply let him die. The Muslim in the previous story shows us what it means to even love the person that is supposed to be our enemy. In this nation, we are celebrated as the good guys and the heroes of the world. But if that is the case, why are we more concerned with unborn children than the children who are here, who are being caged, assaulted, and killed at our own border?
Yeah.
And if that wasn't enough, it's also at the hand of for-profit corporations who cannot even be bothered to give them toothpaste or soap. Why do we pick and choose who we will help? Now, a brief historical note. Our government, over decades, has been complicit in the destabilization of numerous Central and South American countries in order to profit U.S. corporations such as the now defunct United Fruit Company, and in the process to control global markets to benefit U.S. political concerns. Our government has literally supported and armed right-wing takeovers of left-wing, democratically elected governments because they did not support elite U.S. interests, and they dared to live as if their countries were their own. To learn more, look into the regime changes of Costa Rica in 1917, Guatemala and Paraguay in 1954, Brazil in 1964, Chile and Uruguay in 1973, Argentina in 1976, El Salvador in 1979, along with Nicaragua and Panama, to name but a few. Now, I'm not trying to beat this horse, but now we have to go even a little bit further back to remember that most of the continental United States was Mexico.
right.
Now, we as a nation, we are modeling the robbers and the assaulters of our neighbors to the south, much in the same way that we robbed this land from Native Americans and took and enslaved people from Africa to help build up the wealth of the nation. We say that we fight for freedom, but my question is, freedom for whom? Who has been made more free by our systems? Have you? How many have died in the name of wars that claimed to be about freedom, but were really about securing resources for the rich and powerful and leaving all of us behind? As people who are Christians, we cannot let nationalism override our ability to care for God's children. When we choose nationalism over compassion, I believe that we are not only acting as the elite and the priest in relation to the injured person on the road, but also as the robbers who beat and robbed him in the first place. Yet God calls us to be the Samaritan. Now I have to admit that although I believe this parable is fundamental to our responsibilities as Christians, there are times and people for whom I would not even stop to help. Because I have experienced violence as a woman in this world, I will rarely stop to help a man, particularly if I'm alone or if it's at night or if we're in a remote area. There have been times I've made an exception to that rule, but not before praying, checking my gut, and gauging the situation, because it is not a given to stop ever. Safety is a factor in our decision-making, even as we try to address our fears and stereotyping. So how do we actually overcome fear in order to love? First, we have to ask, what has killed our ability to care for one another? Because fear is a huge reason, we need to explore what breeds so much fear in our culture. I venture to name that it is our mentalities of scarcity and greed. And I believe part of that is our capitalistic system that chooses profit for capital owners over the good of all the people. Now, I know using the word capitalistic in church is terrifying to some people, and I'm sorry for that. But when I read about the early Christian church, along with the negative impact of the commerce systems of the Roman Empire, it's hard not to see the parallels. When we are led to believe as a culture that we can only get what we need by fighting others for a few prescribed spots, that establishes scarcity. Now we are pit against one another to win that spot, no matter that the other person loses. We have been trained, including by sports, that there are only winners because there are losers. We think to ourselves, everyone can't win, because then I can't claim my own superiority. If everyone is a winner, then that means I don't deserve special treatment. It means I don't deserve more money, I don't deserve the best car, I don't deserve the best looking spouse, nor the most attention. Instead, if we are all winners, it means that each one of us has value, and we are all cared for and about. It is the scarcity model that makes us feel that we need to compete, fight, cheat, lie, steal, and more just to find security and love. Now, I read the role of the Samaritan in this parable as a metaphor that demonstrates how our actions of love can bring the reign of God to the here and now. This is the good news or gospel. It's important to note that the Samaritan went beyond rescuing the man to even paying for his recovery and care. Now, Jesus was revolutionary in bringing this idea of living in love and care in the face of Roman Empire's economic oppression. And they killed him for it. But his model lived on. It was rebirthed in the resurrection, and it lives on to this day. God's realm is available to us whenever we love our neighbor as ourselves. Whenever we welcome the immigrant, feed the poor, stand for livable wages, stand against racial and gender discrimination and hate, and instead show love through an ever-increasing community of people who choose the good of community over the good of profits of systems that degrade us. In these ways, God's realm is manifested on earth as it is in heaven.
That's right.
The systems will continue to resist this, as they always have, but we are free in Christ and have been granted the power to bring God's realm to earth every single day, even in the face of powers and principalities. Can I get an amen for that?
Amen.
All right. Now, say it with me. In Christ's love.
In Christ's love.
We are free.
We are free.
And we are powerful.
And we are powerful.
Actions of love and justice and creating compassionate communities will always be our best way to God's realm. Choose love. Choose Christ's redeeming freedom and be liberated from systems that would pit us against each other. And instead, join in love and care of your neighbor, whether sitting next to you in the pew or in another country or in cages at our border. Stand with one another in active love of neighbor, and let's bring more of God's realm into the here and now. Because in God's love we are what? Free.
Free.
And we are what?
Powerful.
So go forth